Amen. So what have we gathered from Loughborough's book, Great Second Advent Movement, page 270 to 274? What we've seen is that in 1848, God's people had gone to Luke chapter 21, verses 25 and 26, and they had seen the sun, moon and stars, which they knew was the clustering of events of 1798, and they'd also read the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And what they had done was looked at those powers of heaven that had been shaken, and the people who had rejected October 22nd, 1844, the First Day Adventists, who were not aligned with the third angel's message, they had seen this, or they had seen the revolutions in Europe as a fulfillment of this prophecy. The powers of heaven shall be shaken. So there's a discussion, an argument, if you like, between Adventists who are now ready to preach the third angel's message and those First Day Adventists who say you're too late because this is preparation for the Battle of Armageddon. So we can see that. We've already understood that the distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, looks to be a description of 1840. And the connection we made there was the distress of nations, and distress means coming together or being bound together for a common purpose. And what brings people together is Islam. We saw that in Genesis 16:12. All hands joined together to come against him. So we'd had an understanding that the distress of nations is 1840. Now, it's already been suggested, so I'm not saying I'm just coming up with this new, that when we go from this picture work here, which is Matthew 24, verse 34, when it says this generation, we agree that the generation begins in 1798. We've seen that because we can pick it up from verse 29. Hopefully we've agreed with that. And it doesn't go to 1844. We tend to do that in this movement, but I don't think it's a correct application. If we were to do it more accurately, if we were to read the verses as they're written, they're going to see the end of the world. There's these 4 questions. They're asking for the sign of the Son of Man and the end of the world. It's the second advent that's being described here. This is Revelation what, my brother? Yep. What verse would we pick up here in Revelation? What verse are we picking up in Matthew 24? You can look if you're not sure. In Matthew 24, what verse would this be when it says, this generation shall not pass? I'm not asking what...
It is about 34.
That's what that generation is. I want to know what this waymark is. What verse is this waymark?
Verse 34.
It's not verse 34. You can look in your Bible if you want. Let him do it. It says, this generation shall not pass. That is verse 34. I'm okay with that. But we've got a structure here. And you know that 1798, what verse is that one? Let him do it, please. Don't shout out. Okay, so I've got 1798. What verse is that in Matthew 24? Okay, if you look at the board work, my brother, look at the board work. We've done the same picture work here. We've got 1, 2, 3 dispensations. It's this one that we're looking at here, which is the same as this history, and it's also the same here. So it's the sun, moon and stars, which is 1798. And what verse is that?
It is was 30.
Read verse 30 for us.
Okay, it is verse 29.
Okay, so it's verse 29. See, we have it here. We have verse 29. So this is verse 29. Which verse is this one? This is 29. Which verse is this one? Sorry?
30.
Why do you pick 30? What are you seeing in 30?
Because it is same. And then it shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall come the bride of man, and it shall see the Son of Man coming to life.
Okay, so I don't want you to read the whole verse. Tell me what you see to make that verse 30. Which bit of the verse? It is verse 30, you're correct. Which part of the verse are you seeing? My brother, you help him.
The last part of the verse.
The last part of the verse, and what does that say?
Son of Man coming in the clouds.
So it's the Son of Man coming in the clouds. So why do we put 1844 here?
That was the first time the Millerites believed that Christ was about to come there. And we have been using that reform line to mean that this was the fate of the Millerites to look to expect the coming of Christ in the clouds of heaven.
And what evidence do we give that we could put 1844 there? What Bible verse do we use?
Okay, we use the same Bible verse, which is verse 30, and we also use Daniel 7,
verse
9.
So we use Daniel 7, 9, and why do we...
13, verse 13.
Which one we want to go for?
Okay, because verse 9 and verse 10, also verse 13, they are also at the same time there. So, but I would verse 13 now.
So which verse should we put here that's going to...
That 13.
13. Why 13?
because it is that the Son of Man is coming to the clouds of heaven.
So we see a cloud in verse 13. And this one is Revelation. My brother?
1 second.
So have a look in chapter 1 and read verse 7 for us. Aloud, please.
And behold, he cometh with the clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierce him, and all the kingdoms of the earth shall wail because of him. Even so.
Okay, so if we all agree that this is Revelation 1:7, the fulfillment of verse 30, Matthew 24, what gives us the license to make this 1844? Why would we do that? Do we agree that that's what we do? Do you know that? Yeah? So what gives us the license to do that?
Daniel 7:13.
No, we've got Daniel 7:13. I know the verse.
Yes, we make it 1844 when we do study Daniel 7:13.
Yeah, I understand that. So I can't remember which brother. This brother explained that he was going to go to verse 9 and 10 and 13. So he understands that study. So I'm assuming we all understand at some level what that study is teaching. So I'm asking, what gives us the legitimacy to make that 1844? What are we saying if we do that? Anybody, unless you want to carry on.
We make it 1844 because of the event that happened in 1844.
So what event is happening in 1844?
Christ moving into the most holy place.
And how does that line up with the second advent? I guess that's what I'm asking. How does that line up with the second advent?
Because during that time they were expecting Christ to come back.
I know, I understand their mistake, but they didn't do this. We're doing this. No, Millerites didn't draw a picture like this. This is our picture work. So I'm asking, why are we doing it? Because they didn't do that. I haven't seen any studies of theirs that go to Matthew 24 and sort of do all of this stuff.
We do it because we use Revelation 10.
Revelation 10.
Yeah. Where mighty angel comes down on say that's Christ. And most of the find that that's Christ.
Speak louder.
We use Revelation 10.
I got that.
Yeah.
Christ
coming to John around that time. So we usually.
It's not around that time. It's 4 years before, 1840. But you said this was Daniel, not Revelation. My brother, you had your hand up?
Yeah, because the coming of Christ to the Ancient of Days, he comes in the cloud. And he's coming to earth. What we have read in 1:7 is coming to second advent. So you see, he's going to the Ancient of Days and he's coming to earth. He comes in the cloud.
Okay, so all we're doing is proof texting the word cloud. So we've got C and C, and we're proof texting. Is that safe? Sorry? That is?
What's coming is in the cloud.
I know both of you've got clouds and clouds, but I'm saying, is it safe to do that? Yeah? Or isn't that like me saying 1833? I'm going to draw another reform line here. I'm just going to join it to that one. So that's Millerite history, and I want to make this 9/11. Would you be happy for me doing that?
Okay, let me say something again. Because in 1844 Christ never came to earth. Okay, So the reason why we need to line them up, we see this what events happened in 1844 that the Millerites understood. So we need to know it's coming in the cloud in 1844. Was not is coming to earth. That's why we need to line them so that we see it's coming to the ancient of days, it's not is coming to the earth.
Okay, so I'm going to line 1833 because it's not 9/11. I think that's what you just told me. You said 1844 is not the second Advent, so we're going to line them up.
Whichever you do.
But we don't draw reform lines that way. We don't draw a reform line and say 1844 and the second Advent, and we say we're going to do that to show that they don't line up. The whole point is that we show that they do line up. Let me ask another question. Well, I don't know if you have the proof for this. I don't. When Jesus leaves the holy place, the most holy place, this is for Brother William. When Jesus leaves the most holy place and comes out of the sanctuary, does he do that on a cloud?
So, literal.
Okay, let me ask a different question. When Jesus goes from the holy place to the most holy place, does he go on a literal cloud? Or does he just go on a cloud?
On a literal cloud, I'm not sure, but I don't think.
But he goes on a cloud?
Yeah.
Okay, so my question was, when he leaves the most holy place, does he go on a cloud?
I'm not really sure.
You mean you don't know the answer? So have a guess. If he went in there on a cloud, would he come out on a cloud?
Yes.
Brother Rogers, what do you think? I'm not saying you know the answer. I don't know if we have proof of this, but if he went in on a cloud, would he come out on a cloud? Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah.
So when he comes out, he'd probably come out on a cloud. We know that cloud is a chariot of some kind. Yeah? We understand that. I'm not trying to argue what the cloud is. But if we were going to do that, if we were going to say in and then out on a cloud, even though we don't have inspiration to teach us that, if we made that assumption, when does he come out? What waymark is that?
Close of probation.
So this is close of probation. And this would line up with 1844. And how many times do we do that? Sorry? Really? Or lots? How often do we make October 1844 close of probation? Okay, so sometimes you do it at Sunday law, but equally we'll do it at... why do we make it the Sunday law?
Because of the shelter.
Because of a shorter, isn't it? Because what do we teach in this movement? That the Sunday law is... Sorry? Okay, so we're not going to use the word close of probation, we just use shut door.
Yeah, but I think we use close of probation.
I mean, we might be hesitant to use that nowadays,
Yeah.
but 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we used to wax eloquent. This is close of probation. No more time left. Everything shuts down there. So that's why we often put October 44 at the Sunday law. At least that's what I understand is that we do. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that's what we do. So if 1844 is the close of probation, and we all agree with that, remember this cloud isn't in inspiration. Yeah? So if you're taking notes, let me do it in blue so you know that this is not inspiration. This is just Brother William's best guess. He guessed that one. So I don't get the blame. So we're up here, what are we doing? We're saying 1844, which is close of probation. Was 1844 a close of probation?
Yes. Where are you asking?
Sorry?
As in, where are you asking for the minarets?
Yeah, in 1844. Explain the language that this would be a close of probation.
Because if we know if we use the reform language, since we have understood this, and we say the second coming for the minaret was in 1863. Therefore, the close of probation must be prior to 1863.
And you'd make it 1844?
Yeah, and we can argue it from Matthew 24 to see that it is 22nd of 1844.
From Matthew 24?
25.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said Matthew 24. Okay, so shut door. Who else spoke? Festus spoke? I thought it was Cephas' voice, but I can't see him. Okay, someone else?
You can also use the Church of Philadelphia.
The Church of Philadelphia. So, what do you know about the Church of Philadelphia? Why has Brother Rogers mentioned Philadelphia? Can't hear you, sorry.
It existed from 1833 to 1844, according to my own understanding.
Okay, I need a bit more information than just it existed then. Because then now I'm going to ask you, how do you know when it existed? Don't go to Haskell or anyone else. Tell me why it exists, why you think it... How are you going to locate it?
It comes after Sardis.
So where's Sardis? Where are you going to locate Sardis?
Sardis we located after the persecution, 26th persecution.
So 1798.
Yeah.
So where do you want to locate Philadelphia?
Philadelphia. Now, the reason as to why I say it existed from 1833 to 1844 is Philadelphia is the only church we know was sinless. Because they were inspiring that there will be a second coming of Christ at 1844. So it was a pure church than any other.
Okay, my brother, what Bible verse are you going to go for Philadelphia?
It is Revelation chapter 3 and verse number.
Verse 9? Is that what you said?
It means 7 and 8.
Which verse do you want to begin at? Do you know?
I believe it, but I'm suspecting it's from around 7. But it is in Revelation chapter 3.
Okay. My brother? Philadelphia. Why did Brother Rogers say Philadelphia?
Because there is where you find Christ addressing that He opens a door that no one, He shuts a door that no one can open, and opens another door. So it is giving us the significance of opening the door of the most holy place, and He shut the door of the holy place.
Okay, what verse does it begin in?
Revelation 7, 7.
It starts in verse 7. To which verse is the shut door?
It is 8.
Verse 8. Read verse 8 for us loud.
It reads, And I know thy works. Behold, I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it. For thou hast a little strength, and hast kept my word, and hast not denied my name.
Okay, my brother, tell us what that verse means.
Yeah, what I understand is this is what you find in Matthew 25.
Okay, I'm not worried about Matthew 25. You just tell us what this verse means.
In October 22nd, 1844, there was a door that was shut, and then another door was open. So the door to the holy place was shut, and then the door to the most holy place was open.
Anything else in that verse? Okay. Anything more in that verse? So we've got a shut door to the holy place and an open door to the most holy place. And this is all October 1844.
Okay, in the verse is also addressing these people as having a little strength and has kept his word and has not denied his men. You can also see that at October 22nd, 1844, they were disappointed and therefore they got a little strength. But they did not deny the name of God. They still kept them and therefore they were addressed as faithful.
And we read in Loughborough's work that when it first started, it was small and weak, the light was not strong. There's one more little piece of information in the verse.
Yeah, I would think when the shut door also has a significance, because when we understand the door that was opened, that's where we get the salvation of our souls. When we understand the significance of the door that is open, and we understand the position of Christ and why the door has been opened for us, we understand that's where we get the salvation of our souls, because it is the door to the most holy place where there is atonement for our sins. So the open door teaches us something.
Okay. Anything else in the verse? I'll let you finish.
Okay, what I see from the beginning of the verse, it says that I know thy work. So there should be a work of Philadelphia that God knows.
There should be a
work of Philadelphia.
A work of
Philadelphia.
Okay, sorry. Anything else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not going to comment on what you obviously comment, but when you read this verse, I think my brother read it and I saw this phrase, a little strength. I remembered what we were reading this morning from James Akbar when he was describing how the light begins. And I think it's a discussion we had here. Does it begin in 48, 47, or 44?
So we're going to go back to that in a second, yeah?
So I think I saw there a little strength, and when you see, it says, where did the light break out? Let the angel teach us where the light broke out. It commenced from a little. So if you track, please.
So even though that's from Loughborough's book, even though it's Bates writing that, he's sitting there writing out what Ellen White says. So if we have confidence in Bates that he's writing out Ellen White, that's an Ellen White statement. She says little strength, and we just read little strength. And I think someone made that comment, so we can mark it there.
Also, we can read verse 12.
I just want to read this verse first, because there's one more piece I want to get from this verse.
If you read verse 8, it says, I know thy works, behold, I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it. So I tend to think if you have a door, it's not in the house, but it is my thinking, if you have a door connected with it, you must have a key. So maybe showing us that connected with the Philadelphian church, they were given the key to study the Word of God.
And the key, you're going to make Miller's rules?
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. So the thing that I saw, did you want to add something else? Is that men are trying to do what? The one that he shuts, men are trying to force that open, and the one that's open they want to shut. So there's a struggle between two groups, the Philadelphians and some other group. So we can see that there's this struggle between these two groups. You can see that in Matthew 25. They go to the door and they try to force it open, and it's not going to open for them. So we've got this shut door. So I'm saying, can we see that as a close of probation? What does close of probation mean? It can mean, we can express it in different ways. My brother, how would you tell me what close of probation means to you?
I understand it based on Daniel 24, Daniel 12 verses 1. I will say close of probation simply means that there is no space for atonement. As in, if you sin, there's no way else can atone for you. That's my understanding of atonement.
So there's no more atonement. My brother, what does probation mean?
Testing.
Testing. Everybody okay with that definition? Probation means testing. Often we kind of make an approximation and we say probation equals preparation. Often we turn it into a preparation. It has some legitimacy, but the dictionary definition means to test. So close of probation means end of testing. So who's being tested here? So if we're going to mark Philadelphia with the shut door and open door, Philadelphia has completed its testing period. And we know Philadelphia is just one dispensation for God's church. It goes all the way through Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. It's just one church all the way through. So God's church at some point must have experienced a completion or end of testing, because there's this shut door. It's an end of one experience. So we can mark it as a close of probation in that way. Are we okay with that reasoning? Everybody okay with that reasoning? So if we've got close of probation here, October 1844, how do we line this up with the second advent? Which is what we're doing here. The way we're doing it is through cloud and cloud. Yeah? As far as I understand, the speakers that I've seen do this use this cloud to align these two waymarks together. But we know that 1844, was it ever going to be the second advent? Could it have ever been the second advent? It could never have been the second advent. It's not like, the Millerites were unfaithful in 40 or 42, or they made a mistake in April, therefore it's no longer the second advent. It was never ever going to be the second advent. So we can't line these two up in the way that we do here. So I want to say that when we do that, we've been doing that wrong, and we shouldn't persist in it if we're okay with that. That doesn't mean that we can stretch far into the future, like into our dispensation, which is number 3. Doesn't mean you have to go to number 3, like whatever year that's going to be. I don't know, 2025, 26, whatever number it's going to be in the future. We don't have to do that, because Ellen White says long before 1888, Christ wanted to come back. And he could have come back if the Millerites had been faithful. And what is their unfaithfulness, Sister Emma? What is the Millerites? I call it Millerites when we're shifting now into Adventists, because he's going to use the term Adventist. We're post 1844. What did they do that prevents Christ from returning?
To go into a Laodicean condition, which is wilderness.
Okay, so they're going to Laodicea. They're going to this Laodicean condition, and it prevents Christ from returning. So time drags on, and now there's us. And even though it wasn't God's will, God's got enough information in His Word to still allow us to be in His Word, not outside of His Word, if I can express it that way. And so perhaps one of our strongest arguments is we use this concept of 4 generations. So we use 4 generations. Brother Wilson, the 4 generations, can you mark the dates for us?
No,
from Millerites to us, yeah.
The first one is from 1844 to 1888.
Oh, so you're going to do it that way. 44 to 88.
88 to 1818. The third one, 1818 to 1957.
So this is the first, second, third, and fourth. So we've got a way of explaining our own history by talking about 4 generations. So I'm arguing that if the Millerites had been diligent and done their work correctly, that this history here wouldn't have been 1844, it would have been another date. We know that it wouldn't have been 1850, it had to have been after 1850. So it would have been from 1850, and Ellen White says it should have been before 1888. So somewhere in that history, it would have been the Second Advent. And I'm suggesting that it was 1863. And I guess the primary logic that I'm going to use to suggest that, two pieces of logic, but it's really one. It centres around higher medicine. So I'm saying higher medicine, I'm not saying he's the one that would have discovered it, but he's the driving force. Higher medicine, where's the first time we see higher medicine?
After 1844.
First time is 24.
The first time is 1844.
October
23rd of October. So he's walking in the cornfield. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts of why he's in the corn. You do?
Yes. They had gone to pray in a certain room, and they wanted to ask God why he didn't come. And so when they were coming out, walking the field from praying, a hand touches him and he focuses up and sees Christ coming from the holy place to the most holy place. And his colleague now writes what happened. I can't remember the name.
I guess I meant, does anybody have an idea of the prophetic significance of why it's a cornfield, not a wheat field or a potato field? Specifically marks a cornfield. I don't know, there must be a reason for that. Now you're laughing at me. Not really. Sorry, I couldn't resist. So I'm saying higher medicine is the person who comes in 1844. He explains the sanctuary message. And then in 1856, you see him come up again in another significant role. And Brother Andrew, why is he coming up in 56? What's he doing there? You're not sure? So he writes a series of articles on the 2520. You know that, don't you? Yeah, I thought you did. So he writes a series of articles on the 2520. And what's the point that he's making in 56? What's he saying? Simply
saying that there is only another line of 2520 within 723.
So he says there's another line of 2520 that we basically have not discussed. And he says my 2520 is the right one, which means William Miller's one isn't quite right. So if that study had been continued, I'm suggesting, we don't have any evidence, that they would have done what we did. And what did we do when we found out about this second 2520? We harmonized it. And not only did we harmonize it, we resurrected the old one. So you don't really see much 2520 being discussed. It's all about the third angel's message, which is the 2300 days really, which is the sanctuary message that higher medicine does. So higher medicine, are we okay to go to Daniel 8? We don't turn there, but Daniel 8:14, higher medicine is going to explain Daniel 8:14. Do we agree with that? And Daniel 8:14 is which prophecy? So the 2300 days. But we can also make an argument that it has characteristics or information about the 2520. We can explain that on a number of different levels. But just that if we could just agree with that. So if he's going to explain the cleansing of the sanctuary, 2300 days, he is also going to be explained the 2520. And he does in 1856. And I'm suggesting that they would have harmonized the two 2520s. The one that's in Daniel 8:14, which is 1844, and the one that's in 1798. And where is that one? Isaiah? We're in Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 8.
7 and 8.
Isaiah chapter 7 and 8. So, brother over here is saying Daniel 8:14. He said 13, but I'm going to go with 14 because 13 is the question. The answer is 14. So I'm saying it's in the same verses that Hiram Edson is dealing with in 1844. It's the same place that you're going to find the other 2520, which is 1798. So are we okay with that understanding, or are people not aware of that? We're not going to study it. I just want to get an idea if people are aware that you can go into Daniel chapter 8 and find 1798.
I did hear what you said.
So my question is, Hiram Edson's 2520, if we can call it that, ends in 1798. And I said, what Bible verse could we go to? And someone said Isaiah 7, Isaiah 8, and my brother over here said, we can go to Daniel 8. He said verse 13. And so I'm saying verse 13, verse 14, put them together. So it's in the same verses that you see 1844 that you can also see 1798. So my question is, who is not familiar with our ability to do that? If you don't put your hand up, I'm assuming everybody is. Okay, so just one person? So some people are not aware that we can do that. So let me just do it really simply. If you go to Daniel 8, and he said verse 13, which is correct, but I'm going to go to verse 12. I think you can see it really easily in verse 12. So let me ask another question for those who said they weren't sure about 1798. Are you happy that in Daniel chapter 8 you see paganism and papalism in those verses? Yeah? And are you familiar when you go from verse 9, 10, 11, 12, it goes from pagan to papal to pagan to papal. Are you familiar with that? So verse 12, which would be which power? Pagan or papal? Don't read the words, because I asked the question, are we familiar that it goes pagan, papal, and you said yes. Did you say yes to that?
Yeah.
Don't read the verses. I just asked you, are you familiar that you can go pagan, papal, yeah?
Yeah.
So verse 9 starts with pagan. Verse 10 would be papal. Verse 11 would be pagan. And verse 12 would be papal. Are you familiar with that? Without even looking at the words. You don't inspire me with confidence when you said that. Okay, so if you say yes, I'll take you at your word, yes. So read the last part of the verse says, and it practiced and prospered. In the King James it says it. In the original it should have said she. If you look through the verses 10, 11 and 12, if you go to verse 10 it says it should be she, papal. If you go verse 11 it says he, which is pagan, and verse 12 it says it in the last part of the verse, and it should be she. So this is papal Rome. It says it practiced and prospered. So the papacy is going to practice and prosper. When does it stop prospering? When does it stop prospering?
1798.
It stops prospering in 1798 because it receives a deadly wound. And if you go to the beginning of the verse, it says, and an army was given to him. It says him. It shouldn't be him because it's in italics. It just says an army was given to the papacy. So that's all I want to see. I'm not trying to do the whole verse. An army was given to the papacy, and then the papacy did what? The last part of the verse. Practiced and prospered. And it stops practicing and prospering in 1798. You agree with that? Why did it stop prospering in 1798? What happens to it? So I'm going to say no, it doesn't receive a deadly wound. I want another answer. What happens to it? What happens to the papacy in 1798? My brother? What happens to the papacy in 1798?
The army is taken away.
The army, this host that was given to it at the beginning of the verse, is taken away or leaves. So it's given an army and it begins to do what? Begins to prosper. You take the army away and it stops prospering. So we could go to Revelation 13 and use the imagery of a deadly wound, or Revelation 17. But in this verse, I want us to see that the prospering begins because of an army and ends because of an army. Are you okay with that? So in verse 12, can you see 1798? Yeah? So if we're okay with 1798, I'm not trying to say that that's 538 when the host is given to it. It's not that straightforward, the verse is a bit more complicated. But it's given an army and the army's taken away. I just want to keep it at that. But you agree it's 1798. So you can go into verse 13 and you can also show 1798. But I just want to keep it that simple. So Hiram Edson's 2520 we can find and locate in the same chapter as 1844. Are we okay with that? So he's going to find the sanctuary message, 1844, and what's connected to the sanctuary message? Sorry? The host or the 2520. So it's the 2300 days that he's going to sort for us, and he's going to sort the 2520. Hiram Edson is a really important person. He doesn't get the credit that he's due, I don't think. So why do we need the two 2520s? What are they going to teach us primarily in the context of this study?
Okay, I think when you harmonize and bring together the two 2520s, you want to create this prophetic chiasm.
So it's going to create a chiasm. I'm going to suggest this. Think about this if it's true. When you have chiasms and you have an alpha and omega, and the alpha equals the omega, we all agree with that. That's not my question. When you have a chiasm, is there always time involved? Or is the alpha and omega the same event? Can the alpha and omega be the same event in a chiasm? In a repeat and enlarge, it is. It normally is. It says, thy law have I hid in my heart. And in another verse, it will say, I love thy statutes. So it's not, I love thy law and I love thy statutes, and they're separated by time. Let's just repeat and enlarge. Statutes equals law, if you're okay with that. That was a really bad example, but I think it serves its purpose. But when you have a chiasm and it's the same thing, the beginning equals the end, is it always separated by time? Sorry? Is it always separated by time? So have a think about that. Because the reason I'm asking is because of this one here. Before Brother Rogers gave us this one, I would have said yes. So I'm not sure if this one breaks that rule. So we have a chiasm, and does everybody know the chiasm of the 2520? Is anybody not sure? So we all know? Okay. You know? Yep. Do you know my brother? Give me the dates.
In fact, in from 723.
You want to begin in 723? I'm going to say no.
6 and 7.
I'm going to say no. So I'm going to begin in 742. So 742.
723.
Sorry, 723?
Yeah.
So 723,
677.
677,
Then you go to 1798.
1798,
1844.
1844,
Then you go to 1863.
okay, 1863. So you see, you need this to get this. Yep. And my brother, what Bible verse is that, or chapter?
Chapter 7.
Book.
Isaiah.
So that's why my brother wanted to go to Isaiah chapter 7 when I said, where do you go to if you want to find the 1798 one? So he was taking us here in Isaiah 7, but I wanted to go to Daniel 8. So this is Isaiah 7 verse 8, and we're going to get this 19. We're going to get 19 and 46, which is this 65 years, and we're going to get 46 and 19. So I'm suggesting that there's this structure that you can create here, and this 19 I'm suggesting is the binding off. And I'm using binding off not in harvest sense, but in conclusion. It's going to conclude the 2520 and it can bring you to 1863. So I'm saying the reason why higher medicine, which year? In 56 is going to resurrect this 2520 study. He's already put in place Daniel 8, 13 and 14, 1844, and now he's going to put in place 1863. That's why he's resurrecting it, to create this chiasm. Now, I agree, for people who are watching, that you can't prove that. I'm not saying there's some Spirit of Prophecy quote. I'm just saying I'm going to use logic. I'm going to call it logic, but I think has a basis to it, because otherwise we're going to say everything's coincidences, and hopefully none of us believe in coincidences, even if you don't agree with what we teach in this movement. I guess I'm talking to the camera, because I know people will watch this and people will struggle with what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. So I know that people won't agree. Some people won't agree, but I'm saying it's not coincidence that higher medicine is doing both of this work. It's not coincidence that the 2520 and 2300 days are in the same chapter, Daniel chapter 8. They're in the same verses, Daniel 8, 13 and 14. All of this is leading us, I think, to develop this argument of 1863. So my two arguments are, first of all, it mirrors the 2520 structure. And my second argument is that it's the man higher medicine that's doing this work. Higher medicine unlocks Daniel 8 in 1844, and then it would have been unlocked in 63. Whether or not he would have been the one that does the unlocking, I don't know. But he's the one that's going to bring up the 2520. And he has to bring up this 2520 here, to to create this chiasm, otherwise you don't have one. Are we all okay with that logic? Yeah? And what we're doing now, we add 126 years to this to get 1989. But remember, this is a chiasm, so we know now that we can also go back 126 years and mirror that chiasm back here. So for a long time we just used to do the chiasm, put 126 and have it sort of lopsided, unbalanced, but now we can go back and we can tie up these events with this one, and you can do the 151 as well. Any questions on that? So let's summarize, let's come to a conclusion on this thing. I'm saying this picture work is wrong. You can't do 1844. If you wanted to do number 1, which is Millerite history, so we'll put 1 equals Miller, 2 equals who? 144,000. 144,000 is a symbol, and some people said us. So it's a more technical symbol of us. So I could have put us, but I'm going to use 144,000. And number 3? Ellen White. I'm going to put, if you don't mind, I'll put SDAs or Adventist, if in more technical term, because Adventists go from 1798 all the way to the Second Advent. We pick up 7 day in 44 to 48, that kind of time period. But if this is SDAs, the last church, this is just 144,000, this is the Millerites. I'm saying number 1 is wrong. You can't put 1844. I can't prove that it's 63, but I'm suggesting it would have been 63. Are we okay with that?
I'm just wondering, if we are locating the 70-day Advent starts from 1798, and then why did we say the Samuel span that the first generation of 70-day Advent starts from 1844? What is the logic of showing 1844 as opposed to 1798?
Okay, so before we do this generation, you're picking up this picture work. I'm saying I think this is wrong. Before we prove that this is wrong, we want to see what all these things are. So we're going to do all these things. We've done most of this, we just need to finish that off. Then we're going to say this generation. Where does the generation begin? Because the test, S is Sabbath, the test begins in 44. We've shown that through Loughborough's work. The question is, when does the generation begin? And when we first did this, the very first class, we said it begins in 1844. And I'm suggesting I don't think that's correct. So I've already stated that. So I'll take 7 day out. I'll just call it Adventist. Adventism, if we're okay with that. So if we do this, I think we're on more firmer ground now. So if we go back to number 1, because the Millerites could have finished their work. So we'll. Is everyone happy that you can't line up 1844 with the Second Advent? I want us all to be happy with that. So now we can create a Millerite line. And it begins in 1798 and it ends in 1863. And here we have 1844. And this is the 10th month, October. So if we do this, now when we come to Luke 25 and 26, what can we say? We've got 1833, and we've already demonstrated that this earth is after this earth, because this is men's hearts failing them, and this is the distress of nations. If we're okay with that. We know that this was the cause and this was the effect. We know that this is in the history of the plagues, or Jacob's time of trouble, when the powers of heaven are going to be shaken. And we could prove this. How? How did we prove this? Was it through the spirit of prophecy? That the powers of the heavens is in the history of the plagues. How do we show that? We showed that through scripture. Hopefully in your notes, you can go back to your notes. Ellen White confirmed it, but we did that through scripture. So we showed that, and then we saw that the men's hearts failing them, this fear. The verses tell us that they're connected, and then we went to, I think, was it Revelation 6:13? 6:14, and we saw that they were scared, and they said, "Fall upon us, the rocks." So we made that connection there. And so this distress of nations is before this one here. They're two separate events. They're not the same event. And so if we can do that, then that gave us the argument or the logic to say that the distress of nations, which was 21:25b, Luke, was in 1840. I'll put 1838 to 1840. We mark 1838 because Litch is looking at the distress to do his calculation, if we're okay with that. Everybody okay with that? We didn't actually find Litch's work on this one, did we? Because you weren't here in that class. So if you can try and find it, where he says 21:25 distress of nations is what's going on, because I couldn't find it. So Brother Rogers, just walk us through this logic, because this is what you did for us a couple of days ago. You remember how you showed us that the distress of nations, the application of 1840, would work because we have to contain everything in this history.
So, I said if you come to, that is Luke 21.
So if we turn to Luke 21,
verse 25 and 26. So when you look at verse 25, it says, "And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars." So I think as far as this class is concerned, we have agreed that the signs in the sun and moon, that is 1780, and in the stars is 1843, and upon the earth, distress of nations. So we know this comes after 1798. So when you look at the first part, you have the sun, the moon, and the stars, which are the powers of heaven, and we have the earth. When we come to the second part, we say it means heart failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So we have agreed in this class that the earth in verse 26 is different from the earth in verse 25.
are we okay with that? That's what this structure is saying. These two earths are different.
And we have also agreed that there is something happening on the earth in verse 26, and that is an effect of the cause of the shaking of the powers of heaven.
So we've got the cause is the heaven, the effect is the earth.
Then when you come to verse 27, it says, "And they shall see the Son of Man." So according to the suggestion we are making, we are saying that is 1863. Question or logic.
So this is 21:27.
So and we have also agreed is that what we have agreed so far is that this earth in verse 26 and the heavens, that happens in the time period of the plagues.
So this is the plagues. I've got 7 plagues here.
And we know the plagues come in the close of probation.
So I'm going to come out of this one and come into this one. We've already marked October 10th, 1844 as a shut door for which church? For Philadelphia. So this is the shut door for Philadelphia, which means it's the end of testing, it's the close of probation.
Therefore, that means that our grappling to place correctly the distress of nations in verse 25 will come in between 44 and 33.
So we've got 33 to 44. Which is where we've got the distress of nation. It's somewhere in this history. So that's the logic that we're using now to mark the distress of nations here. If we're okay with that. Any questions? Okay. I have a question, but I'm going to save that. I'm going to save my question for later on. So we can mark 1840 here. This is what Litch does, according to Brother William. He says that there's a passage he's got that he uses distress of nations. So I haven't seen that, so I'm accepting that. Even if he didn't, we're picking up the word distress, and we're saying distress equals to bind together or come together. And this is Genesis 16:12. Everyone comes together. And how big is everyone? How many people is everyone? 4 people. We've got it here. 4 is a symbol of worldwide, which means everyone. And there were 4 powers. There were 4 European powers. My brother, can you name the 4 powers for me?
No.
Sorry?
We have France.
France. UK. Germany. Sorry? Okay. The 4th you mean? My brother? Russia. So he gave us France, UK, Germany, and Russia. Do you remember when we studied 1848? What was one of the things that they wanted to do? These people. Brother Robert? I'm asking a different question. What was one of the things that the people wanted to do? These people, they said, down with the Pope, down with the King. And it says something about what did they want to create? I don't know if you remembered. I did. Independent states. And remember, if you go back into the Great Controversy, when it speaks about Germany, it talks about the German Empire. And so the German Empire covers more than one country. It's not just Germany. It covers other countries. So those kings can cover more than just one country. So if you get rid of the kings, each country can be its own state. So it's not UK, France, Germany, and Russia. One of them isn't right. Does anybody know? Prussia. So it's not Germany, it's Prussia. So it's UK or Great Britain, France, Prussia, and Russia. Sorry?
France was not the exhaustive.
Oh, it's Austria, sorry, not France. It's two of them are wrong then. So let's list them out.
Russia, England, and Austria.
Russia, Prussia, Austria, and England. Okay.
There is a comment I wanted to make on what I've observed that we've done on the board. When we were speaking about the distress of nations, we showed that we brought this analogy of holding together. And oftentimes in this movement, if we find a word like hold, most of us would run to say Islam is held. But we showed that on the contrary, it's not, that hold does not apply to Islam. It is the countries to restrain Islam that are holding together. There are another point that I've seen when we've spoken about the harvest. Where do you write that?
I might have rubbed it off by now.
Okay, you're saying if everything was okay from 1844 to 1863 to have marked the harvest. But I've realized from the model that we have developed in the recent past about harvest, that will be subtly different. Because when we come to the history of the 144,000, for example, their harvest is close of probation, second advent. And in that history, we don't have anyone being saved. But this line would be like it's in harvest time, and it's when they're doing the work of evangelism.
Yes. There is, although we can draw this line, and if we were going to do it, I would suggest that this is the ploughing, former rain, no I don't, I'm just going to put former rain, latter rain, because it's not 1840, that's the demarcation between them. I don't want us to see that. And then harvest. So ploughing, former rain, latter rain, harvest. We've got these 4 dispensations. And if this is correct, and I think it is, this history here is different to R1. It has some subtle differences. And one of the differences is that it's in this history here that you have the 1850 chart, and the 1850 chart, I would argue, is the loud cry. It's the evangelism cry to go to the world. So this line looks different to R1. It doesn't have all the same characteristics. It has the same structure, but it's not identical. So either it's wrong or it's correct and it looks different. So I want to observe that. Okay, so we've made that argument that this is 1840 and therefore I'm just going to take the shut door in Philadelphia out. We're now in 1848. And what are they going to do in 1848? What did we read is happening in 1848? So you've got political, moral, and Adventist things all going on. What are the Adventists doing? Sorry? So they're now preparing, and they're preparing to do what?
Take the third angel.
The third angel's message. Sorry? So they're prepared to give the third angel's message, and we're going to mark that happens when? We're going to mark it happens in 1850. They already begin the publishing work before 50. They've already started it, but the culmination of that work is the 1850 chart, which is this loud cry. Are we okay with that? So, I want us to see one thing. Assuming this is correct, that this is the harvest, assuming that's correct, how many waymarks have we got here? two-way marks. We've got 48 and 50. Yeah? So 1850 is the loud cry. Are we okay with that? And this is showing that before the loud cry, there's another waymark that comes up. If we skip and make an application now, and we were to make this raphia and panium, what should we expect between these two dates? Two-way marks. And one of them would be a loud cry, and one of them would be, I'll just call it, I call it preparation. If we're okay with that. Yep.
I don't understand why you not verse 27 is equal to 8.
21:27 says what? And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in the cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to come to pass, look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. So 28 is out of that. 28 is a repeat and enlarge. 21:27 is the same as 24:30 and 13:26. So it would be 30, 26, and then 27. So 27 says, then you'll see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven. So we'd mark the cloud here, which is the second advent, and I'm suggesting that 1863 would be the second advent. It was when Christ was to return, and the logic that I'm using for that is the chiasm of the 2520. I don't know if you were in the class when we did that.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? Or not?
So how is the first chiasm?
How is?
The chiasm, how is the chiasm pointing to the second time?
Okay. How is the chiasm pointing to the second advent? My brother?
Okay, in the beginning of it, when the prophecy was given, between 527 to 742. You see that 19 years later, 723, the scattering begins. And then 46 years later, the people of God who remain now are totally scattered.
So here I'm going to put an S for scattering, and then I'll put 677, and you say the scattering is complete. Is that what you said?
Yes.
So I'll put T for total. So total scattering ended. Beginning, I guess.
So when we get to 1798, the scattering ends. That is the beginning of the end of the first line, and the gathering begins from there. And when we read to 1844, 46 years later, the temple of God is complete, and therefore the gathering is done. And what is being done from 1844, 19 years later, we take us to 1863, is the work now in which the people of God that have been gathered are bound together.
So the gathering is finished here in 44, and what's been here is that they're being bound. And so the 2520 is the prophecy that takes you all the way through the great controversy, the scattering into the gathering, and it finishes in 63. So we have that argument. We know that Hiram Edson is the one that does that work. He's the one that understands the sanctuary message, 23rd of October. He's the one that discovers the second 2520 to create the chiasm. We know that Christ was meant to return before 1888, so he has to have returned between 44 and 88, somewhere in between that. And so it's not just a random guess to make it 1863. 1863, we're using the 2520 to unlock time for us, which is, I think, the purpose of what it was. So that's why it's 1863. And then we were just in Luke, that's why it's verse 27. Is that good, or? Yep. So who was asking? There was a question. Or was there not a question? I thought there was.
There was no question. You were explaining.
Okay. Brother Robert?
Why are you saying preparation?
Can't hear?
Why are you saying preparation?
Because this is a preparation here. They understand the message, it's matured, and the maturity of this message is then going to be given in its complete fullness in 1850 when the chart's produced. They already start sharing the message between 48 and 50. They're already going to start producing a booklet. There's only a few people, and one of their people's arguments are that there's only 3 of you that can do this work. They mark that there's 3 of them, 3 teachers, and they don't have any money and they're scattered. And what's people's argument that's happening now that they're saying? It's too late because?
We are in preparation for Armageddon.
Because they're saying now we're in Armageddon, and the teachers are saying it's not Armageddon yet. It's still time to preach the third angel's message. For whom? For God's people, so that they can be sealed. If we're okay with that logic. So that's why I put preparation here. So I've just taken that concept and brought it up to there. I'm not trying to define what that is. I just put preparation from 48 because it says now they're prepared to give the third angel's message, and they're getting ramped up to do that. By the time you get to 50, now it's when that's when it begins to happen.
So when you say God's people, do you mean the Protestants?
Do I mean?
Protestants or those who are in the
Those 3 teachers, James White, Ellen White and Bates. I didn't name them, their enemies named those 3. It's a small little band of Sabbath keepers.
No, I'm saying, when you say that it is time for them to give the sealing message to God's people, who are God's people in that way? Is it the Protestants or the elite?
In this history, we didn't study who that was, but one thing is it's the world. And I think they go back and talk to other people who, not their fellow people that were studying with them in this history, but certainly Protestants that they're studying with, I think.
Okay, what I mean by Protestants is this the general population that have studied the prophetic message before 1844? Is it the world?
It seems to be, because the people that are arguing with them are the First Day Adventists in one paragraph. In the other paragraph he called them who? He called them Adventist ministers who hadn't heard the third angel. And if we're willing to go with Sister Emma's definition of heard, it means Adventist ministers who refuse to listen to the third angel, which were the people that were in this history. So they're not even going to listen to this message, so they're going to go to a different class of people, not the rejectors, they're going to go to a new class. That's what that history seemed to say to me.
Okay. So, Alwan, there's something, when we say, for example, when it comes to the Sunday law, we want to give a message to the world. I would love us to define what that world is. I don't think when you come to the Sunday law, suddenly you preach to an atheist and it changes. So I think our definition of who the world is should be proper in our minds.
So, when you go to Revelation 18 verse 4, who are you speaking to? My people. And I think before you probably came to this message, hopefully not now, maybe you might think that an atheist or a Muslim or a Hindu, in their ignorance, could be classified as God's people. Maybe that's what you used to think in that history. I would argue that it's not. I think the only people that are going to be targeted in that history, in the Sunday law history, are Christians. And the reason I'm going to say that is why. Why would I say that? What's happened to these people that you're speaking to already? What's already happened to them?
Which Christians are you meaning at the end?
I'm talking about Daniel 11 verse 41. The real Sunday law. In that history, we give a message that says, "Come out of her, my people." And who comes out? Edom, Moab and Ammon, who are relatives of God's people. We know that. So these relatives of God's people, my question is, who are they? Are they God-fearing Hindus or Muslims? Or are they upright, moralist atheists who now you're going to say, you didn't believe in God, but let me tell you, there is a real God. And they said, oh yes, we believe him now.
They would accept that.
So I'm asking, how do we know that it's only Christians that are going to be targeted then in that Sunday law?
God's people, my people.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. These are brethren who they have been receiving false doctrine, and in faith they are worshiping God according to the little light that they have, though they have not been given the true light. But that time now they see the right light.
Okay, I'm going to argue that they've been given the true light long before.
Okay, now I want to use the model of agriculture. When we come to these people, the Sunday law, what we are doing to them is harvesting them, meaning they've long been planted. And in fact, by this time they have received the latter rain. So they must be God's people, Christians.
So, have everybody heard that? So that's the argument where I'm saying, at the Sunday law, they don't suddenly receive light that's been hidden from them. They've been worked for a long time before. Years, I don't know how many years it is to the Sunday law, but an extended period of time.
Then also 25-20 concept.
The 25-20 concept?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That the people of God, the 10 tribes were not gathered in 1798, once the 2 tribes were gathered. And those 10 tribes are now being created at Sunday law. These are the God's people who is scattered in the world. So Matthew 10 also shows that there are my flocks in a different fold. So those scattered flocks of God in a different fold are now going to be called.
Okay, I agree.
And so the parable of the prodigal son also pictures that it is they are brothers too. As in, the prodigal son was a brother. He had an elder brother that he walked away from, and the younger brother walked away from home.
Then he had to return again at the end of the day. Then the elderly brother was angered. The elderly brother is a symbol of the Adventist church, and the prodigal son a symbol of the Protestants who walked away from the light that they once had.
Okay, so the main argument I want to use is this preparation, former rain, latter rain period. This is what Brother Rogers has said, that they've had a lot of work already done to them. Are we in the binding off yet? Look how mature we are. Maybe not morally, hopefully we are, but at least intellectually. We know an awful lot about what's going on in the world. We're politically savvy. We understand our message quite well now, and we're not even at the binding off stage yet. So when you go to the Sunday law, verse 41, and you're in the binding off period for them, they must know an awful lot of things. And most of us are struggling with who? Our parent church. We've already had issues with them. Things are already going on. So a lot of things are already happening before you get to the Sunday law.
So I don't understand who are the Christians you are speaking from.
You don't understand?
Who are the Christians? And another question, please.
We'll do that question. My brother said, many sheep have I who are not of this fold. So they're Christians who aren't Adventists.
We're not Adventists.
Yeah.
So they are Muslims.
I don't think Muslims are Christians.
So meaning you are created to be doing that.
No, I'm saying if you understood Brother Roger's logic, is the time period for conversion when on a line, not you, on a line, when are you supposed to be converted? Sorry? I can't hear you.
By 9/11.
By 9/11. Okay, so in this ploughing stage, you're supposed to have conversion. You're supposed to get baptized here at 90. I don't know why I'm pointing there. You're supposed to get baptized at 9/11, and then you go through rain to make you grow up. Then you get bound off. You agree with that? So this Muslim or Hindu or atheist, you have to find out for them, when was their time of the end? When did they have this preparation time? When were they supposed to be converted? When did they grow up into Christ before they can be ploughed? Before they can be harvested or reaped. So they're not left in doom. Their opportunity and choices are happening before the Sunday law. But Adventism teaches that everything happens at the Sunday law, like everyone's asleep, nothing's happening, and we suddenly wake up at Sunday law and we start going to the world saying, by the way, you know, there's a Sunday law and the Pope is going to do all of these things. That is a wrong model. That's plain and simple, it's the wrong model. All of the world needs to be warned, needs to be converted before the Sunday law. At a simple level. So when we talk about no public evangelism until the Sunday law, we mean a specific thing. And we don't mean something else. I think in the movement we've misunderstood what no public evangelism looks like and what it actually means. So I don't want to stretch too far into things. Brother Robert. Can you speak a little bit louder because you're at the back? I can't hear you.
There's a quotation where Sister White says that the Sunday law crisis will be raised within Christendom. So I tend to think that it will be a controversy that involves Christians. But at the same time, it raises questions in my mind when we say that I understand the logic that when we come to the Sunday law it's harvest, so these people must have been confronted by the truth before. But those who are confronted by the truth before the Sunday, is it limited to Christians by definition in terms of those who believe in Christ, or is it possible for a Muslim to have been confronted by the message before the Sunday? For example, when we go to the book of Isaiah, chapter 21, and we see the burden of Arabia, the burden of Luna, they are calling on the watchmen and asking the Lord of the night, what does that mean? So when we say, I understand the logic that by the Sunday law, it's now harvest, these people have already been confronted by the truth. But is it limited to Christians only? Is it only Christians that can be confronted by the truth by the Sunday law?
Okay. Oh, sorry, my brother, sorry.
Yes, I have a question. My question will come from 5T463. What Sister White said, the work which the church has failed to do in a time of peace and prosperity, she will have to do in a terrible crisis and the most discouraging obedience comes. Where have we failed? Because we've been in...
Where did we fail?
Yeah, as a church now.
2012.
So we failed in 2012.
It was you asked me a question from 5T. Now we have to do a work in discouraging circumstances.
So we have fulfilled this.
I think so. Someone else they disagree, but I think.
Okay.
What dispensation is that? Do you think?
Because
can't be the binding of, because in Jacob's time of trouble we're not doing any work for anyone, and she's talking about at that large scale. So it's when we're doing a work. Where do you place that statement?
Yeah, I can place this statement after midnight.
I don't know what midnight is. I don't know what midnight is. Give me another waymark, not midnight. Midnight comes in lots of different places.
Before Sunday law?
Before Sunday law. So you think that's before Sunday law?
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe I'm wrong, because I think that's at Sunday law. I think that's the work that we do during the Sunday law period. But I'm open to correction.
But what would you say the time of peace and prosperity here?
Before the Sunday law.
Before the Sunday law. Then we should have done the work before the Sunday law.
Because we were lazy before the Sunday law, when the Sunday law hits, we're going to have to still do the work. It's going to be a lot harder now.
So why can't we do the work now before Sunday law?
Who's we now? Who are you talking about now, we? This movement? Because it's already past the Sunday law. It's 4 years past the Sunday law. Like 4 years. We missed it. We had our opportunity 6 years ago and we missed it. Try going to the church. Try going to your churches now and see if you can do an easy work. You can't. The churches are blocked off to this movement because we messed up. Now we have to do a work. It's a lot harder because we didn't do what we were supposed to do. I think. So I think we're fulfilling that passage. Brother Rogers.
Okay. I want to...
That was a distraction. That's not part of our class.
I want to react something that Lord has asked. When you go to the book of Daniel 11 verse 41, you see three classes are going to be saved. Edom, Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. So, when I come to my mind and ask myself, why did God give 3 powers, not 4, not 5, not 6? That must have a meaning to it. And when you see, we come to the end of the world in the age of Daniel for 4,000, you are going to be confronted by 3 evil powers. The dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. So I believe these 3 classes represent people who are going to be saved out of these 3 spiritual realms. From the spiritual realm of the dragon, I think when you go to the book of Great Controversy, 588, Ellen White says, spiritualism, how does she say? Spiritualism. No, she says she uses something of the sort like spiritual manifestation of those 3 powers. So then what I believe is that when we classify these 3 powers, we come to the dragon and go to Daniel 11 and identify who among those 3 classes belong to the spiritual realm of the dragon. So then my argument is that they're given an opportunity before the Sunday law to respond. And before the Sunday law, they must have come into line and by definition be called Christians.
Has anybody, or have you got an idea where you want to put Edom, Moab and Ammon in here?
I think we discussed, but
has anybody got an opinion?
Yeah, I agree with this point. I think.
Just tell me where to put Edom, Moab and Ammon if you have an opinion. Edom, so is Ammon.
And not Moab.
Sorry?
Moab.
Oh, Moab. And this is Ammon.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we can talk afterwards about why that is.
Yeah, the difference of opinion to him.
Oh, okay, so you don't agree with that?
I do Ammon and Moab the other way around.
Okay, so but you agree with Edom?
Yeah.
So I'm suggesting this is outside the scope of a proper study. Because now we're just talking about opinions because we're not doing it thoroughly. Not this bit. That I'm saying I think they're all Christians by the Sunday law. The Sunday law is a fixed waymark, but I'm not saying this is 100% correct, but this is a close approximation as far as I can see. And what I mean is this, what the close approximation is. Let me do it here. I want to say this, that Sunday law, to close of probation, when we talk about the call to Edom, Moab and Ammon as they all come in, that it's not all at one point, but it's an escalation. So I'm going to use the word progressive. So what I mean by that is one person comes and another, then another, and the numbers grow. So I'm not saying that's 100% correct, but I think it's a close approximation of what's going to happen. And I base that upon, Ellen White says, one country after another. She seems to indicate some sequence of countries that implement the Sunday law. So progressive, and I'm going to say one after another. So whilst I say at the Sunday law, a fixed point, everyone has to be a Christian, if this was, I don't know how long, say 2 years, 12 months, if you're here, you may not have become a Christian here. You may have 12 months of seeing what's going on in the world and have an opportunity to be receiving rain to mature you, and here is where you'd be harvested. So it'd be post-Sunday law. So even though I say by Sunday law it's all of them have to all be Christians, maybe not every single person is a Christian at the Sunday law, but by the time the message comes to them, come out of her my people, they have to all be Christians.
I think now I understand better, because before it seemed like you're saying that the other religions do not have a chance at all. But when you say they need to have become Christians by the Sunday, now it's clear in my mind.
Okay, so I'm saying they need to all become Christians before the Sunday law. Simplistically, the next sophistication is that some could become Christians 12 months afterwards, wherever. Obviously that time is just a guess, because they're not going to join until. So this person here, this would be what for them? This history. What would this history be? This would be the binding off of the harvest. Therefore, this would be the latter rain. So the latter rain can extend past harvest, just at that simple model. Just want to show one more thing. Even though we do that, if you come to our line, where's the Sunday law in our line? And when's our loud cry? So you've got 4 years. So we're saying we're not even crying to anybody until 4 years after the Sunday law came in. So even though we pick the Sunday law and we do this progressiveness, the cry really is here. So we can mark the cry as a singular event and also a progression. So there's various ways of looking at that. So that's why I'm suggesting, I think Brother Rogers suggested, that it's the Christians. I don't know how we got into that discussion. So I guess it's probably time to finish because we're way over time, but I just want to make this point here, that if this is the binding off, we know 2 waymarks here, 48 and 50. We can project this into our line because this also is the binding off. This would be Raphia to Panium, and they would have 2 waymarks. So all I want to see is that we've got 2 waymarks. One of them is the loud cry, and there's one that precedes it. And I'm sure we all know, I'm going to do another line on top of this one, but I'll put it underneath here. So if this was 2014, and this was Raphia here, does everybody see what I've done? I've taken the history here and put it underneath. You get that?
Yes.
This isn't a binding off. It's not a binding off. But we've got 2 waymarks here as well, because we've got a loud cry, which is what? 2018, and we've got this. I've called it preparation here, but I'm suggesting this would be 2016. So we've got quite a number of evidences that we've got these 2 waymarks. You can see them in the Millerite line. You can go to Jacob's time of trouble, and you can mark it in Jacob's time of trouble. We've actually got a date for this one, 2020, according to Sister Tess's studies. And if we went to the big line, 144,000, would we have 2 waymarks there as well? What are the 2 waymarks?
Death decree.
The death decree, the decree.
And the time when they are loud.
The loud cry, the voice of God. So we've got 2 waymarks in that history as well. If that's too fast, we'll go over it again on Sunday. So just summarising, I admit that this history here, which is the binding off, isn't looking exactly the same as ours, but it has all the same characteristics. So there's that complexity. I would argue that Islam may not have even shown up in this history, that the Millerite or the Adventist understanding of the 3rd woe, which was what? What did they say the 3rd woe is? James White, does anybody, just roughly? I think it's the plagues, it's the 7 plagues. I think it's pretty explicit on that. If you were to do that, isn't that exactly what we would say, we're saying here? That we say the angering of the nations is what? 9/11, because of radical Islam, because we equate it to the distress of the nation, but it fits right here in the plague history, that 1848, the angering of the nations, seems to fit into that history, I would suggest. I want to close, but I want to make one more observation before we do that. So this is for Brother Rogers. When you take the 7 churches, can you have gaps between one church and another? Could you sort of have, could I put Thyatira here, and then I'd say Sardis here, and have a sort of a blank space? No, you can't have that. Don't worry, I'm not tricking you. You can have an overlap though. Okay? Only in the last 3. So we're here 10:44, and we said this is the shut door, and we said this is a close of probation for Philadelphia. If it's a close of probation for Philadelphia, it means the end of testing for Philadelphia. Does that mean Philadelphia is finished in October 44?
When we looked at the beginning, when we defined the close of probation to be a symbol of testing, I saw that complexity and saw that Philadelphia then would stretch to 1863.
So, if I go to 1850, I don't know if we all agree, but I would mark Laodicea here. Does anybody disagree with that?
Why?
Sorry? Why?
There is a quotation where she marks the Laodicean condition.
By the time you get to 57, I think 57 is the earliest one I've seen, where she says, we're already Laodicean. Okay, I'm not going to explain why, because I don't want to. That wasn't my point. I'm just saying it's 50. Okay, so it's certainly before 60. Would you agree with that? Where would you place it?
Probably 44.
In 44. I would. Okay, I'm going to put 50.
It's okay.
Okay, so. Oh,
52.
I've got 52.
52. She's using Revelation 3:14 to 20.
Oh, okay, 52. We've got 52 one. Early writings 107. And you're saying that's 1852. Oh, that's good. Okay, so I'm going to suggest it's 50. I don't think it's back in 44. So if Laodicea begins here, where's Philadelphia going to end? It can't end here, even though it's the end of the testing. So would you put it to 50, or you take it further past?
So if we consider the point which we are considering, if they were faithful, that is, I believe Philadelphia will have transitioned to Laodicea. It will have continued to be that Philadelphia until received the Son of Man in the clouds in 63. But on this point, I will agree that it goes to 50.
Okay, so we can mark this here up to 50, even though probation has closed. It doesn't mean it's the end of the church. We still have had to have Laodicea. Still have to have a number 7 somewhere. But maybe the characteristics would have been different. It wouldn't have been negative. No, it would have been negative. Maybe it would be identifying a different group. Okay, so just sort of make that point so that we're all aware. Just because it's a close of probation, it doesn't mean it's the end of the church. And maybe we need to explain why 1850 is when they become Laodicean. Let's pray. Hopefully it's not too much information, that we're okay on that. The main thing I wanted us to see before we pray is that we can't do this. And if you can't put 44 here, you have to put 63. I'm saying 63. You could put another date if you don't agree with 63, but it's after 44. That this is when you'd have to put that cloud. And we're using that argument to show that the distress of nations here would have been 1840. Because I'm using this logic here, that this is the binding of 7 plagues, which is the 7 plagues here. And we could define this from Scripture, not with the Spirit of Prophecy. Spirit of Prophecy just confirmed it, but we did this through the Scriptures. Tag these together, put them into the 7 plagues history. This is the 7 plagues history, therefore this is going to be before it. And the only time that we've got before that, in agreement with Josiah Litch, is 1840. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. We'll go over it again on Sunday to review. Heavenly Father, we give you praise and thanks. Lord, those things which we as a movement have understood, help us, Lord, to be able to confirm and understand and defend. Those things which we have misunderstood and have not taught in a correct way. Help us to become aware of those things, to see them, Lord, and to straighten those misconceptions out. We know, Lord, that you are leading a people out, and we thank you that we have an opportunity of remaining part of your movement. There have been many shakings, and you have graciously called us into this movement. Many of my brothers and sisters here may be new to this movement, but whether we're new or whether we're old, you are more than willing to teach us, and we thank you. Please bless us through these sacred Sabbath hours, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.